Here's the truth. Most people think success comes from relentless pushing, more hours, more hustle, more stress. But that's a shortcut to burnout, frustration, and wasted effort. Real progress, the kind that lasts, comes from discipline, patience, smart positioning, and understanding the natural flow of your own growth. Today, I'm going to give you 5 principles that will change the way you see your grind, your patience, and your life. These aren't feel-good slogans. These are cold, practical truths. Absorb them, apply them, and watch the results unfold. Momentum is not something you create in a moment, and it is not something you force with effort alone. Most people imagine that if they push hard enough, if they sacrifice enough, if they stay busy enough, the world will finally bend to their will. That is a comforting story, but it is not true. Real momentum, real progress is built quietly, almost invisibly, long before it shows up in results you can measure or notice. It begins with the decisions you make when nobody is watching, the small choices that seem insignificant at the time, the disciplined routines that feel tedious or even unnecessary, and the patience to let those choices accumulate without immediate reward. The human tendency is to look for validation in the present, to chase the visible outcome as if it defines the work. That is a trap. Momentum does not respond to impatience. It responds to consistency, to careful positioning, and to the compounded effect of repeated actions over time. Consider the simplest example: saving money. Someone can deposit $50 a week into an account, or they can spend it on immediate gratification. To an outside observer, that choice seems almost trivial. But over time, the difference between saving and spending becomes enormous. After a year, the saver has a clear foundation, a resource that can be leveraged or invested. The spender has only the memory of immediate pleasure, with no structural advantage for the future. Momentum is exactly this. Those small, seemingly invisible actions accumulate into a force that eventually becomes unstoppable, and yet it requires no dramatic effort. It requires discipline, consistency, and patience. This principle applies in every area of life. Consider relationships. A person who consistently shows integrity, keeps commitments, and invests attention in meaningful connections quietly builds trust. Another person might seek attention, push for approval, or overextend in visible gestures, hoping to manufacture closeness or influence. Over time, the first-person reputation becomes a magnet. Opportunities, respect, and support begin to align around them almost automatically. The second person, who sought to force outcomes, finds that attention fades and trust erodes, leaving them exhausted but without traction. Cause and effect thinking is critical here. The choices you make in the present, how you invest energy, how you manage your attention, how you honor commitments, determine the long-term outcomes that often feel invisible until they suddenly appear. The problem most people face is a mismatch between effort and perception. They push harder and harder, believing that more action equals faster results, when in fact it often leads to wasted energy, divided focus, and burnout. Consider someone trying to climb a career ladder while simultaneously managing dozens of side projects, attending every networking event, and trying to be everything to everyone. Each of these efforts is not inherently wrong, but collectively they dilute momentum. The work that would have compounded effectively becomes scattered. Opportunities arrive, but the person is too busy, too scattered, too fatigued to recognize them or act decisively. Momentum is not about motion. It is about directed, focused motion. Discipline and focus are the foundation of momentum. Choosing one path and sticking to it consistently, rather than chasing the immediate appeal of novelty or distraction, allows forces to accumulate over time. This is uncomfortable for many because it requires saying no to social invitations, to impulsive purchases, to projects that promise quick satisfaction but no long-term value. It is easier to justify constant activity because it feels productive. But true productivity is not volume. It is the alignment of action with outcome. Every decision carries an opportunity cost, whether acknowledged or not. By scattering energy across too many fronts, people quietly destroy their ability to build meaningful momentum in any single area. Momentum is also a product of patience and timing. There is a tendency to measure success as if it must be immediate. People observe a friend achieving a milestone and panic, comparing their own progress to visible markers, instead of evaluating the compounded effect of their disciplined choices. This leads to over-pushing, overextending, and, ironically, stagnation. Momentum, by contrast, grows in the background. A skill learned daily, a habit practiced quietly, an investment held with restraint, all of these create a structural advantage that is invisible at first, yet when the alignment of effort, timing, and opportunity occurs, the results feel instantaneous. Those who chase outcomes often never see the payoff because they are always ahead of the natural flow, always trying to force what is not ready. Human behavior amplifies this effect. People respond to immediate stimuli and visible outcomes. We are wired for instant feedback, for applause, for recognition, and for avoiding discomfort. That wiring is useful in survival contexts, but catastrophic in long-term growth. Building momentum requires resisting these impulses. It requires doing what is necessary, not what is gratifying. Showing up day after day, even when there is no recognition, even when results are not yet apparent, compounds advantage quietly. Momentum is invisible to the untrained eye because it is measured not in moments, but in accumulation, the compounded effect of choices, behaviors, and disciplined effort over months and years. Sacrifice is part of this calculus. Every hour spent on meaningful effort is an hour not spent on distraction. Every disciplined choice is a trade-off against comfort and immediate pleasure. People often underestimate this, treating small sacrifices as insignificant. Yet the accumulation of minor sacrifices is what separates someone who eventually experiences exponential growth from someone who remains stuck, frantically pushing without leverage. The reality is simple but uncomfortable. The choices you ignore, the energy you scatter, the shortcuts you pursue, these quietly sabotage your momentum. Conversely, the choices you consistently make, the attention you focus, the sacrifices you accept, these quietly build it. Real-life observation reinforces this principle. Look at the person who trains consistently, not because they want instant results, but because they understand that small, repeated effort compounds into competence, resilience, and opportunity. Look at the business quietly reinvesting profits instead of chasing hype. Look at the student who studies diligently each day rather than cramming for exams. In every case, the results appear inevitable after a period of disciplined accumulation, though at first the effort may feel unseen or underappreciated. The truth is, momentum is never absent. It is merely latent until it reaches the point where compounding is visible and unstoppable. Finally, it is worth noting that momentum cannot be transferred or faked. No amount of urgency, external pressure, or self-promotion can substitute for disciplined accumulation. Momentum is created by repeated, focused action over time, aligned with clear goals and constrained by thoughtful trade-offs. It requires resisting the natural human urge to chase recognition, to demand immediate payoff, to scatter energy in search of comfort or excitement. The person who understands this truth does not measure success in hours or applause. They measure it in alignment, in consistency, in the quiet buildup of advantage that eventually bursts into visible results. This is why they do not panic when the world seems stagnant, why they do not overpush when the timing is not right, and why they do not waste energy trying to force outcomes that are already in motion, invisibly, in the background. Timing is the element that most people ignore, yet it is the one factor that quietly dictates the trajectory of every outcome in life. We live in a culture obsessed with speed, instant gratification, and visible progress, and because of that, many people mistake constant motion for meaningful momentum. They push, they chase, they force events into being, believing that if they accelerate hard enough, the world will respond. The truth is that outcomes have their own natural rhythm, and no amount of frantic energy can override it. Trying to rush things is like trying to force a plant to grow faster by shaking it repeatedly. The roots need time to settle, the soil needs to be nourished, and the growth will only happen when conditions align. Misreading timing or ignoring it entirely is the single most common reason people exhaust themselves while their goals remain stagnant. Consider a simple scenario: someone trying to advance in a career. They work long hours, volunteer for every project, and constantly push for recognition. From the outside, it seems like they are doing everything right, yet promotion or acknowledgement never comes. Meanwhile, another person works steadily, prioritizes projects that align with long-term objectives, and waits to engage with opportunities that naturally match their skills and preparation. When the timing is right, when the project aligns with organizational needs, or a key decision maker notices consistent performance, the second person moves ahead seemingly effortlessly. The first person, exhausted and impatient, has burned energy on noise rather than signal. The cause and effect chain here is simple. Uncalibrated effort leads to fatigue and missed signals, while disciplined alignment with timing multiplies the effectiveness of every action. Human behavior amplifies this principle. People crave control, believing that relentless effort is the only path to certainty. When a deal, a promotion, or a breakthrough does not appear on their schedule, they interpret it as failure and respond with more force. This is rarely productive. The universe, or the marketplace, or life itself does not reward force. It rewards alignment. When preparation, patience, and timing converge, the outcomes that once seemed impossible appear natural and inevitable. This does not mean inaction. It means strategic action. It means knowing when to push and when to wait, when to act and when to observe. Understanding the rhythm of timing allows energy to be directed with precision instead of scattered in desperation. The discipline required to respect timing is uncomfortable because it demands self-restraint and delayed gratification. People are wired to respond to visible cues, applause, recognition, and immediate progress, so waiting feels like passivity, feels like losing, feels like giving up. But the reality is that patience is not the absence of action. It is the intelligent placement of effort. Every choice carries an opportunity cost. When you push prematurely, you commit energy to something that may not yield returns, and that energy cannot be recovered. Every misaligned effort is energy stolen from projects, relationships, or opportunities that are ready for your focus. Being patient in timing is a form of leverage. It allows you to concentrate when the payoff potential is maximized. This principle also extends to relationships. A person may try to force trust, affection, or collaboration before it is naturally earned. They may over-communicate, over-explain, or overcompensate to manufacture a connection. In the short term, this might appear productive or reassuring, but in reality, it undermines authenticity and strains the other person's natural receptiveness. Trust, like results, has a timeline. It cannot be rushed without consequences. When you understand timing, you allow relationships to develop organically, and the payoff, whether it is loyalty, partnership, or influence, is durable. The impatient person may get immediate attention, but it is shallow and fleeting, and the effort required to maintain it is far higher than it would have been to align with the natural rhythm. Timing also plays a role in personal growth and skill acquisition. Learning, mastery, and competence follow a curve that cannot be accelerated without sacrificing depth. People who try to shortcut the process, rushing through education, skipping practice, or forcing experiences often achieve superficial outcomes at best. Real capability requires steady accumulation of knowledge, experience, and reflection. Consider someone learning a craft or a skill. Day after day, repetition may feel monotonous or invisible. Progress seems slow. The temptation to quit or rush is strong, yet each disciplined session compounds quietly. When timing aligns with readiness, when an opportunity appears that matches their level of preparation, the individual can execute with precision and confidence. The impatient, the rushed, the forced, these people often fail to capitalize because they were never ready, even if they acted first. A quiet observation from everyday life illustrates this further. Notice how seasons change. Crops do not sprout when the farmer wills them to. They sprout when the soil, sun, water, and temperature align. The farmer's role is preparation, planting, tending, and understanding patterns. Not shaking the soil in frustration. Human progress is the same. You must prepare, position yourself, and observe. There is a moment when effort intersects with opportunity, and acting in that moment produces disproportionate results. Acting too early or too late diminishes returns, dissipates energy, and creates frustration. Those who understand timing conserve their energy, magnify their effectiveness, and leverage the natural order rather than fight against it. Opportunity is another lens through which timing becomes critical. Opportunities rarely arrive neatly packaged or at convenient times. They require readiness, presence, and patience. If a person is constantly forcing action trying to generate results where conditions are unfavorable, they risk missing the opportunities that are already aligned with their preparation. The cause and effect sequence is stark. Impatience leads to scattered action. Scattered action leads to missed alignment. Missed alignment leads to suboptimal outcomes. Conversely, patience and timing allow you to strike when probability and preparation meet, generating results that appear effortless to the observer but are the product of discipline, alignment, and foresight. Discipline, focus, and the courage to wait are intertwined with timing. Waiting does not mean doing nothing. It means prioritizing, concentrating effort on areas that matter, and resisting the urge to overextend. It is choosing depth over superficiality, leverage over volume, and strategic positioning over frenetic motion. Sacrificing immediate satisfaction is often the hardest part, because human instincts crave instant reward, social validation, and visible progress. But long-term thinkers understand that the payoff is not in immediate recognition, but in the leverage that occurs when patience and preparation converge with the right conditions. Misplaced focus or divided priorities quietly destroy timing. When attention is scattered across too many projects, when energy is spent chasing every flashing signal of opportunity, when effort is distributed to satisfy immediate desires, timing is compromised, momentum is diffused, patience is eroded, and the natural alignment of preparation and opportunity is delayed or lost entirely. The cost is subtle, often invisible, until months or years later when results that should have been evident are absent. Respecting timing is therefore not abstract. It is practical. It is a disciplined understanding of when to act, when to wait, and how to direct energy so that the leverage of natural alignment can work in your favor. Understanding timing also fosters resilience. When results do not appear immediately, when outcomes lag behind effort, it is easy to feel discouraged or to interpret the delay as failure. Those who appreciate timing view these gaps differently. They see them as the necessary incubation period, the silent accumulation of advantage, and the natural interval before compounding manifests. The discomfort of waiting becomes tolerable because it is purposeful, because it is grounded in the rational understanding that premature action yields far less than aligned action. Desire is a volatile, fleeting force. It excites us, it motivates us, it gives us that initial spark of energy, but it cannot sustain long-term outcomes. Most people mistake desire for direction, confusing the intensity of feeling with the efficacy of action. They chase what feels good in the moment, believing that passion alone is sufficient to carry them through months or years of disciplined effort. This is a quiet trap that destroys more potential than outright failure. Desire fades, motivation wavers, circumstances shift. What remains in the long run is discipline, the consistent adherence to principles, the ability to choose action that aligns with long-term objectives, even when it is inconvenient, uncomfortable, or thankless. The difference between desire and discipline is the difference between temporary motion and compounding progress. Discipline is leverage, while desire is merely energy that can burn out without leaving a trace. Every choice made in life carries a trade-off. When someone follows desire instead of discipline, they often exchange long-term stability for short-term gratification. A student may stay up all night inspired to work on a project only when enthusiasm strikes, but when motivation disappears, the work stalls. An aspiring professional may chase opportunities that feel exciting or glamorous, abandoning steady progress for novelty. A relationship may be pursued not because of compatibility or shared vision, but because of the immediate thrill of attraction. Each decision may feel justified in the moment, but the consequence is a fragmented trajectory. The opportunity cost of desire-driven action is enormous. Energy spent where it cannot compound, time invested in pursuits that do not produce lasting outcomes, and credibility or trust eroded by inconsistency. Discipline, by contrast, sacrifices short-term excitement in exchange for alignment and leverage, producing outcomes that desire alone cannot touch. The practical application of discipline is deceptively simple, but emotionally challenging. It requires doing what is necessary, not what is pleasurable. It requires showing up when you are tired, when you feel uninspired, when the world seems indifferent. The person who disciplines themselves in these moments builds a compounding advantage that is invisible to casual observers. For example, a writer who commits to writing a set number of words every day, regardless of mood, will over time produce a body of work that opens doors. The writer who writes only when inspiration strikes may produce beautiful passages, but the total output is unpredictable and uneven. Discipline does not rely on emotion. It relies on structure, consistency, and the understanding that long-term success is a product of repeated action, not sporadic bursts of desire. Discipline also demands the courage to say no. Every hour devoted to a pleasurable distraction is an hour taken away from compounding advantage. Social events, passive entertainment, and momentary indulgences are not inherently bad, but when they are chosen over focused action, they quietly erode potential. People underestimate how small diversions accumulate. 30 minutes here, an hour there, a few skipped commitments. They appear minor, but over months and years, they determine who moves forward and who remains stagnant. Discipline is the capacity to prioritize long-term value over short-term pleasure. And it is the rare skill that separates those who achieve leverage from those who remain caught in the cycle of desire-driven activity. Human behavior naturally resists discipline. We are wired to seek comfort, to avoid friction, and to prioritize visible gratification. This wiring is useful for survival in the short term, but lethal for long-term progress. Discipline is uncomfortable precisely because it opposes these instincts. It asks you to wake up early, to make hard decisions, to practice consistently, to resist impulsive spending, to limit social distractions, to invest in growth that will not yield immediate recognition. It is tedious and visible work. People naturally avoid it. They crave the excitement of desire, the surge of motivation, the social validation of appearing busy or productive. Discipline is unglamorous. It requires humility, patience, and the ability to operate without applause. The trade-offs of discipline versus desire are clear in career trajectories. Someone who consistently invests in skill development, regardless of immediate reward, builds credibility, competence, and trust over time. When opportunities arise, they are prepared. Someone who chases only what excites them in the moment may appear dynamic but lacks the depth and consistency needed to capitalize on rare opportunities. Their trajectory is volatile, dependent on external validation, and vulnerable to setbacks. Cause and effect thinking shows that sustained preparation and disciplined action generate cumulative advantage, while desire-driven action produces erratic and unpredictable results. The same principle applies to relationships. Discipline in relationships means showing up consistently, keeping commitments, investing time thoughtfully, and prioritizing shared goals over fleeting emotion. Desire-driven engagement, on the other hand, relies on attraction, mood, and convenience. The person who invests according to discipline builds trust and security over years. The person who engages according to desire experiences highs and lows, excitement and frustration, and often fails to form durable bonds. The consequences of desire-driven behavior may not be immediately visible, but over time they compound into instability, disappointment, and lost opportunity. Observing daily life reinforces the principle. Look at someone who maintains a long-term habit, like exercising, saving money, or practicing a craft. The results appear effortless to the casual observer, but they are the product of years of disciplined repetition, of showing up when motivation was absent, of choosing structured effort over fleeting pleasure. By contrast, the person who relies on desire may start and stop countless times, chasing immediate excitement or novelty, achieving momentary satisfaction but no lasting leverage. The difference between the two is not talent, luck, or opportunity. It is discipline versus desire. Discipline also allows for clarity in decision-making. When energy is not spent chasing emotional highs, it can be applied to evaluating trade-offs rationally, recognizing opportunity cost, and aligning actions with long-term goals. Desire clouds judgment, distorts priorities, and encourages impulsive action. Discipline, by contrast, structures behavior around principles and rational evaluation. It allows the individual to act decisively when circumstances align, rather than being pulled in multiple directions by transient motivation. Focus and clarity are natural byproducts of disciplined behavior, while desire-driven action produces fragmentation and indecision. Finally, discipline compounds over time in ways that desire cannot. Each disciplined choice, no matter how small, builds structural advantage, skills, habits, credibility, and positioning that multiply across contexts. Desire burns brightly but briefly, leaving no leverage. The person who prioritizes discipline creates outcomes that appear disproportionate to the visible effort because the accumulation has been quiet, patient, and strategic. Discipline does not excite the senses, but it guarantees that when opportunity arrives, the individual is prepared to capitalize fully. Desire may provide energy, but without discipline, it leaves the person exhausted, reactive, and unprepared. Most people spend their lives seeking validation from the wrong sources, chasing approval from others as if it were the fuel that will power their progress. The desire to be seen, recognized, or liked is natural, but it becomes dangerous when it dictates decisions. When choices are made to satisfy someone else's expectations or to earn applause, energy is diverted from the actions that actually create long-term leverage. Every time a person prioritizes external validation over internal standards, they trade freedom for short-term approval, and that trade quietly erodes momentum. Cause and effect are straightforward. Choices made to impress others often come at the cost of consistency, focus, and alignment with long-term objectives, and the cumulative consequences can be devastating over years of repeated decision-making. Consider a professional who constantly seeks recognition from bosses or peers. They push projects into visibility, speak up in every meeting, and shape their work around what others are likely to praise. In the short term, this may feel productive, even rewarded. In the long term, the pattern creates several problems. First, it shifts the person's focus from outcomes that matter to appearances that are ephemeral. They may neglect deeper, foundational work that is less visible but far more valuable over time. Second, it makes the individual reactive rather than strategic, constantly adjusting behavior to meet others' expectations rather than applying disciplined judgment. Finally, it conditions the mind to seek external approval, creating a dependency on unpredictable feedback loops instead of building internal leverage that compounds quietly and reliably. The result is subtle. Energy is misallocated, growth slows, and the person becomes vulnerable to the whims of external circumstances. Human behavior explains why this trap is so common. People are wired to respond to social cues. Positive reinforcement from others' praise, recognition, acknowledgement releases dopamine, creating a sense of reward. Negative feedback triggers stress and avoidance. When decision-making is tied to these responses, choices are rarely rational. They are emotional and short-sighted. In careers, relationships, and personal growth, the most effective moves are often unglamorous and unrecognized at the time. Showing up consistently, maintaining integrity, and focusing on the long-term payoff often goes unnoticed until the compounding advantage becomes undeniable. Those who wait for applause before acting are constantly behind the curve, spending effort reacting rather than shaping the future. Every decision carries an opportunity cost. Energy spent seeking validation is energy not spent on preparation, skill development, or strategic positioning. A student who studies only to please teachers, or a professional who works only to impress others, sacrifices the depth and quality of their actual competence. In relationships, people who overcompensate for approval risk creating imbalance. They give attention, favors, or effort that is not reciprocated or aligned with shared values. The cumulative effect of these small, validation-driven choices is subtle but profound. Over months and years, they can redirect the trajectory of a life away from self-directed progress and toward reactive, unsustainable patterns. Discipline, focus, and principle, in contrast, concentrate energy where it will compound, producing results that do not require applause to be meaningful. Observing everyday life illustrates this clearly. Consider a craftsman or artisan quietly refining their skill over years. Nobody is applauding each hour spent practicing, but when opportunity arises, the person's expertise speaks louder than words ever could. The competitor who seeks recognition through flashy projects or public approval may appear busy and impressive, but their depth is shallow, their leverage limited, and their results inconsistent. The disciplined individual benefits from a compounding effect invisible to the casual observer. This is the natural law of cause and effect applied to human effort. Energy directed toward internal standards builds structural advantage. Energy directed toward external validation dissipates as wasted effort. Sacrifice is part of this equation, though it is rarely acknowledged. Choosing principle over applause often requires discomfort. People must decline invitations, ignore distracting commentary, and refuse to meet superficial expectations. They may appear indifferent to others, misunderstood, or even criticized. Yet this is the cost of building leverage that compounds over time. Every moment spent seeking external approval is a moment spent on a path that does not guarantee meaningful outcomes. Sacrificing short-term comfort for long-term structural advantage is the essence of disciplined effort, and it is the quiet difference between someone who achieves enduring success and someone who expends energy with minimal result. Focus is inseparable from discipline in this context. Dividing attention across pleasing others, responding to social signals, and adjusting behavior to meet external expectations diffuses energy. Productivity, skill accumulation, and strategic positioning all rely on concentrated, deliberate effort. A person who constantly shifts to meet others' demands is like a ship being buffeted by every current rather than following a deliberate course. The effect is subtle at first. Small delays, missed opportunities, minor misalignments. Over time, however, the cumulative impact is significant. The person who prioritizes principle and alignment over recognition compiles advantage steadily, quietly, and with structural permanence, while the person who prioritizes applause accumulates exhaustion, distraction, and vulnerability. Opportunity cost extends beyond energy to reputation and relationships. People who act primarily to gain approval can appear opportunistic, inconsistent, or shallow to those around them. Trust, credibility, and influence are eroded when others sense that actions are dictated by external validation rather than internal principle. Conversely, those who act from a foundation of disciplined, self-directed behavior cultivate a reputation for reliability, integrity, and competence. Opportunities that require judgment, responsibility, and preparation naturally flow to those who demonstrate consistency, while those who seek applause often find themselves sidelined when depth matters. The quiet consequences of misplaced focus are profound.